Imagine a world where every choice you make, every step you take, defines who you are. A world where there's no blueprint for life, no set path, only the freedom and the burden of creating your own destiny. This is the world of Jean-Paul Sartre, a philosopher who dared to question everything and sparked a revolution in thought. Born in the heart of Paris, Sartre didn't just study philosophy, he lived it. His journey took him through the corridors of the prestigious École Normale Supérieure and into the depths of German phenomenology. But Sartre wasn't content with academic debates. He was on a mission to uncover the truth about human existence. In his groundbreaking work, Being and Nothingness, Sartre shook the foundations of philosophy with a bold declaration: man is condemned to be free. This isn't just philosophical jargon, it's a call to arms. Sartre argued that we're thrown into existence without a preordained essence, compelled to forge our own path in a world indifferent to our struggles. To truly grasp Sartre's revolutionary ideas, let's dive into his world using a triadic analysis. This approach helps us see how his core concepts, freedom, responsibility, and authenticity, interrelate and reinforce each other. Sartre's philosophy isn't just about abstract principles, it's a dynamic system where each element influences and amplifies the others, much like a harmonious triad in music. In Sartre's philosophy, freedom is deeply interconnected with responsibility and authenticity. He famously declared, "Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." This illustrates that freedom naturally entails responsibility, as every action we take stems from our free choice, and thus we bear responsibility for it. Furthermore, Sartre emphasized authenticity as living truthfully according to one's own values, rather than conforming to external pressures. To be authentic, one must first acknowledge their freedom and then take responsibility for their choices. Thus, authenticity reinforces the mutual relationship between freedom and responsibility. Sartre's notion of bad faith contrasts with this triad, showing how denying one's freedom leads to an inauthentic life. Therefore, freedom, responsibility, and authenticity coexist, each necessitating and reinforcing the other in Sartrean existentialism. Determinism undermines Sartre's philosophy by denying the fundamental aspect of human freedom. If our actions are predetermined, we cannot be truly responsible for them, as they are not results of our free will. Sartre argued, "If I am a being for whom it is impossible to be determined, I escape determinism through the very fact that I am conscious of my being determined." This consciousness of freedom is essential to avoid irresponsibility and inauthenticity. In a deterministic worldview, responsibility is meaningless because our choices are not genuinely ours, leading to an irresponsible attitude towards actions. This irresponsibility leads directly to inauthenticity, because if one cannot own their actions, living authentically is impossible. Therefore, determinism, irresponsibility, and inauthenticity form a triad of negative equilibrium where each negates the positive attributes Sartre champions. Sartre's concept of bad faith is a fundamental act of self-deception, where an individual denies their own freedom and responsibility. He explains this as a state where one puts oneself in bad faith by denying the authentic self. This self-deception is a defense mechanism to avoid the anxiety associated with absolute freedom. However, this results in alienation from one's true self and others. The alienated person is estranged because they live according to false values and external expectations. This alienation then further entrenches bad faith, as the individual continues to deceive themselves to avoid facing their freedom and responsibility. Thus, bad faith, self-deception, and alienation reinforce each other in a detrimental cycle. The absence of self-deception leads to self-awareness, a cornerstone of authenticity in Sartre's philosophy. By being self-aware, individuals recognize their freedom and the responsibilities it entails, allowing them to live authentically. Sartre asserts, existence precedes essence, meaning individuals define themselves through actions. Authentic living demands engaging with the world honestly and openly. This engagement with life, embracing one's freedom and responsibility, reinforces self-awareness, creating a positive feedback loop. Consequently, self-awareness, authenticity, and engagement are integral to Sartrean existentialism, each supporting the other. Sartre's declaration, "Existence precedes essence," encapsulates this causal triad. According to Sartre, humans first exist without predefined essence. We create our essence through our actions. He states, "Man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world." and defines himself afterwards. This essence then directs our actions. Without existence, there can be no essence, and without essence, there can be no action. Sartre emphasizes that our actions define us, reflecting our created essence. Thus, existence leads to essence, which manifests in actions, forming a causal relationship central to existentialist thought. If essence were predefined, it implies determinism, contrary to Sartre's existentialism. In a deterministic framework, individuals are passive because their nature and destiny are fixed. Sartre argues against this, stating, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." If essence precedes existence, people cannot freely define themselves, leading to passivity and a lack of genuine action. This passivity reinforces the deterministic view, suggesting that existence is not primary. Thus, predetermined essence, determinism, and passivity form a triad where each negates Sartre's principle of existential freedom. Freedom in Sartrean philosophy directly leads to action. Sartre states, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you," emphasizing that freedom manifests through actions. These actions, in turn, entail responsibility, as individuals must own their choices. Responsibility reflects back on freedom, as being responsible is acknowledging one's freedom. Without freedom, there are no genuine actions, and consequently, no responsibility. Therefore, freedom, action, and responsibility form a non-linear triad, each leading to and reinforcing the other. Inaction suggests a lack of freedom, aligning with a deterministic view. If one does not act, it implies they are not exercising their freedom, which Sartre vehemently opposes. This leads to irresponsibility, as inaction negates ownership of one's choices. Sartre's existentialism insists on action as proof of freedom, stating to do is to be. Therefore, inaction supports determinism, resulting in irresponsibility. Conversely, genuine action reaffirms freedom and responsibility. Thus, inaction, determinism, and irresponsibility form a triad that Sartre's philosophy seeks to dismantle. Existence implies freedom. As Sartre states, man is condemned to be free. From this freedom arises responsibility, because being free means being accountable for one's actions. He further elaborates, to be free is to be condemned to be free, highlighting that with freedom comes the weight of responsibility. Responsibility includes the acknowledgement of one's existence and freedom, making them intertwined. Thus, existence, freedom, and responsibility are inclusively linked, each giving rise to and reinforcing the other. In a deterministic framework, the freedom to act is negated, leading to inaction. Without freedom, there is no impetus for genuine action. Sartre argues against determinism, stating man is nothing else but what he makes of himself, emphasizing the need for action in defining oneself. Inaction results in irresponsibility because without action, there can be no responsibility. Consequently, determinism, inaction, and irresponsibility form a triad where each element excludes the others, negating the core of Sartrean existentialism. Sartre emphasizes that responsibility entails both existence and freedom. He argues, when we say that man chooses himself, we do mean that every one of us must choose himself, implying that responsibility encompasses acknowledging one's existence and exercising freedom. Existence leads to freedom, and freedom results in responsibility. Thus, responsibility, existence, and freedom are conjoined in Sartrean thought, each reinforcing and necessitating the others. Without existence and freedom, responsibility is impossible. Sartre asserts, to be is to be free, highlighting that existence and freedom are prerequisites for responsibility. Determinism negates freedom, leading to irresponsibility. Therefore, non-existence, determinism, and irresponsibility form a bottlenecked triad, where the absence of any element leads to the absence of the others. Existence combined with freedom results in responsibility. Sartre insists, existence precedes essence, meaning our actions define us, and with freedom comes responsibility. Similarly, existence with responsibility ensures freedom, as acknowledging one's responsibility reinforces the exercise of freedom. Finally, freedom with responsibility confirms existence, as responsible actions validate our existence. Thus, existence, freedom, and responsibility form a harmonic triad where each element supports and enhances the others. Irresponsibility leads to both non-existence and determinism. Sartre argues that without taking responsibility, one's existence and freedom are negated. He states man is responsible for what he is, implying that irresponsibility undermines one's very being and freedom. lack of freedom results in non-existence and irresponsibility. Non-existence leads to lack of freedom and irresponsibility. Thus, irresponsibility, non-existence, and determinism form a dissonant triad, each negating the core tenets of Sartrean existentialism. Existence implies both freedom and responsibility. As Sartre states, man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world, and defines himself afterwards. Freedom results in both existence and responsibility. He asserts, man is condemned to be free, meaning freedom is inherent to our existence and with it comes responsibility. Responsibility encompasses both freedom and existence, as taking responsibility is acknowledging one's existence and exercising freedom. Therefore, existence, freedom, and responsibility form a convergent triad, each element inherently containing and reinforcing the others. Determinism and irresponsibility lead to non-existence. Sartre's existentialism opposes determinism, arguing that it negates freedom, which is essential for authentic existence. He states, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you, emphasizing action as proof of freedom. Irresponsibility results in non-existence, because without taking responsibility for one's actions, one's existence is meaningless. Therefore, determinism, irresponsibility, and non-existence form a divergent triad, each element leading to the negation of true existence. Existence with determinism leads to an alternative responsibility. Sartre asserts that even in a deterministic framework, individuals can still find ways to take responsibility within the constraints imposed on them. Freedom with irresponsibility leads to an alternative existence, as Sartre emphasizes the need to define oneself through actions, even in the face of external pressures. Responsibility with non-existence leads to an alternative freedom, as taking responsibility for one's actions can reaffirm one's freedom. Therefore, existence, determinism, and responsibility form a complex triad where each element interacts dynamically with the others. Non-existence with freedom leads to an alternative irresponsibility. Sartre argues that freedom without acknowledging existence leads to a lack of responsibility, as one cannot take ownership of actions without first recognizing their existence. Determinism with responsibility leads to an alternative non-existence, as responsibility requires the freedom to act. Irresponsibility with existence leads to an alternative freedom, as Sartre emphasizes that existence and responsibility are prerequisites for true freedom. Therefore, non-existence, freedom, and irresponsibility form a divided triad, where each element interacts in a way that negates or affirms the others. Freedom with non-existence leads to an alternative responsibility. Sartre asserts that freedom must be grounded in the recognition of one's existence to truly take responsibility. Freedom with irresponsibility leads to an alternative existence, as Sartre emphasizes that responsibility is essential for authentic existence. Existence and responsibility lead to freedom, as taking responsibility for one's existence is an act of freedom. Therefore, freedom, non-existence, and responsibility form an associative triad, where each element interacts dynamically with the others. Determinism with existence leads to an alternative irresponsibility. Sartre argues that determinism undermines the responsibility that is central to authentic existence. Determinism with responsibility leads to an alternative non-existence, as responsibility requires freedom to act. Determinism leads to both non-existence and irresponsibility, negating the core tenets of Sartrean existentialism. Therefore, determinism, existence, and irresponsibility form a dissociative triad, where each element interacts in a way that negates the others. Existence leads to freedom, with an alternative irresponsibility. Sartre asserts, man is condemned to be free, emphasizing that existence inherently involves freedom. Responsibility leads to freedom, with an alternative non-existence, as taking responsibility for one's actions reaffirms one's existence. Existence and responsibility lead to freedom, as taking responsibility for one's existence is an act of freedom. Therefore, existence, freedom, and responsibility form an integrative triad, where each element supports and enhances the others. Determinism leads to non-existence with an alternative responsibility. Sartre argues that determinism undermines the freedom that is essential for authentic existence. Determinism leads to irresponsibility with an alternative existence, as responsibility requires the freedom to act. Determinism leads to both non-existence and irresponsibility, negating the core tenets of Sartrean existentialism. Therefore, determinism, non-existence, and irresponsibility form a disintegrative triad, where each element interacts in a way that negates the others. Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy challenges us to confront the raw reality of our existence. urging us to embrace our freedom and take full responsibility for our actions. Through the lens of triadic analysis, we see how his core concepts, freedom, responsibility, and authenticity, are intricately intertwined. Sartre teaches us that to live authentically, we must acknowledge our freedom and the weight of the choices it brings. He compels us to reject bad faith, confront self-deception, and avoid the comfort of determinism. So, what does this mean for us today? It means recognizing that every decision we make shapes our essence. It means living with the courage to be true to ourselves, despite societal pressures. It means understanding that freedom is both a gift and a challenge, demanding that we own our actions and their consequences. Take Sartre's insights to heart, live boldly, embrace your freedom, and forge your own path with authenticity. In doing so, you'll not only honor Sartre's legacy, but also carve out a life that is truly your own.